It's been 200 years since the bombs fell. So why are these people still living in scavenged filth instead of rebuilding technological civilization? To begin, imagine yourself in that world, not as a lone wanderer out having adventures with a pocket full of stim packs and the ability to resurrect from your last save, but as a regular old base model HSAP mortal with the kind of educational background you'd get in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. More like Blake Abernathy here, trying to eke out a life from the dirt and keep the family safe from rads, raiders, and other unpleasantries. There's no food unless you grow it, forage for it, or hunt it yourself. If you want any kind of manufactured item, you either have to make it yourself or trade with some wandering merchant with a trunk full of salvage. The socio-economic system is extremely rudimentary. The best we could say is that it's proto-feudal. Small plot farmers work their land, and some of the crop is taken from them by the rough equivalent of lords, whether raider gangs, brotherhood requisition teams, or the NCR tax system. But they don't take so much that the farmers die and can't grow more. Arable land is the source of wealth, as in feudalism, but it generally lacks the formality and stability of recognized lords and vassals within a web of obligations. Clearly, there's a huge potential for more efficiently grown crops and newly manufactured items. Let's ditch this toiling in the fields all day, rig up some of those wandering robots, and relax as the caps roll into our pockets. Except you can't, because while you're out trying to wrangle robots, no one is tending the crops or guarding the homestead. Or you think other people might trade for nice Brahmin hide boots like the ones you made for yourself, only to find out that most people don't have anything to trade to justify the time and effort. Or you focus on one crop you can grow really well to maximize your yield with an eye toward trading some of the harvest for everything else you need. Maybe it works out for you and you have a good year. Or maybe a tato blight wipes out your entire crop and you starve. The entire weight of the socioeconomic structure around you is pushing you inexorably toward a survival strategy of self-reliance and a jack-of-all-trades skill set. Trying to be entrepreneurial or specialize in a specific product is high risk with low odds of success. So almost no one does it. And generation after generation, people live much like their parents did, eking out a living from the ground.
I was born into it.
It's a dark age, and something internally has to change to break out of it. In the very first video on this channel, I posed one possibility, the Brotherhood of Steel choosing to buy the crops from local farmers in Fallout 4 instead of simply taking them.
What would you take for your crops?
I can't see parting with our crops for less than 1,000 caps.
Deal.
This creates a situation where the farmers have a bunch of money but no crops, giving an incentive for the traveling merchants to bring in foodstuffs instead of salvage, which in turn creates pressure to get better at repairing old machines or even build some new ones, a task that can now be undertaken by tinkerers who have a growing market for their skills. Is this sustainable on its own? Probably not. Some farmers will leave and thereby reduce the crop yield for the next season. Everybody learns about inflation as the bags full of caps grow faster than the supply of high-demand goods. And if the Brotherhood pulls out of the region in the first couple of years, the whole thing collapses. But if the arrangement lasts long enough, perhaps only a few years, for a new equilibrium to settle between farmers, merchants, and the Brotherhood acting as a protective state in exchange for taxes, then the relationship between people and property has changed. The farmers and merchants will have become market-dependent producers, will have become business people with interconnected supply chains and financial obligations instead of peasants and scavvers living day to day. The economic fundamentals will have shifted into a new self-reinforcing capitalistic structure. However, if we look at Fallout 3, the Brotherhood isn't a prime catalyst for this. They had an opportunity to establish a regional trading hub, and from that a market economy after they got their water purification project working on the Potomac. Instead, they gave water away, which, like any massive aid program, helps some people in the short term, but has the effect of suppressing local productivity of whatever is being given and leaving them even more deprived when the aid stops. The Brotherhood sucks at nation building. They're at their core a military organization with a fairly rigid chain of command. They think in terms of top-down structure and the current mission. If the Brotherhood tried to build an industrial economy, it would probably be a Soviet-style centrally planned system, only they wouldn't have capitalist countries to buy machine tools and expertise from to jumpstart their effort. Slow-going and not very innovative. Jumping back to the Massachusetts area in Fallout 4, we do see some signs of economic activity beyond peasant farmers. For example, the Atom Cats, a gang of power armor enthusiasts operating out of an old auto repair garage, trade their technical skills in exchange for food from a nearby farm.
We help them out with our skills. They give us food. Works out real nice.
This is still at the level of barter, and neither party is looking to expand their market, but we're seeing a simple example of market specialization.
Man, you talk like a real square.
I'm hip.
Instead of trying to do everything themselves, the two groups have specialized into what they do well and engage in trade, leading to a gain for both groups. While some people will still argue that value is derived from labor, it's actually derived from need and desire, making value subjective. That's why trade works. Both sides are getting something they want more than the thing they're trading away, and neither really cares how hard the other worked on it. As another example, we have Longneck Lukowski selling packaged meat for currency.
I'm Theodore Collins, and I run Longneck Lukowski's, purveyor of the finest canned food in all the Commonwealth.
It's a basic commercial enterprise. Presumably, he uses the money to buy other food rather than eating his own diseased ghoul meat sausage.
If you happen to see that, Lukowski, tell him I hope he dies in a goddamn fire.
And we can't forget this guy.
Caps, bottle caps. What is this, fucking 1612? A bunch of losers blow up the world 200 years ago, and we have to lug around piles of bottle caps? Are you friggin' kidding me? So that's why I've been working with every single shop in the Commonwealth to get rid of caps. Introducing the only form of currency you'll ever need, the charge card.
Of course, in this case, it's an obvious scam, but in a more developed economy with more participants and some kind of institutional backing, it makes sense if we look at it more in terms of what the Knights Templar were doing during the Crusades, operating as a bank for travelers, like a Middle Ages Western Union rather than a credit card, which is just high-interest lending. This is actually the kind of thing the Brotherhood could do if they could figure out how it actually fit into expanding an economic base. But they aren't there yet. Because they're stuck in a self-reinforcing Dark Age socioeconomic framework due partly to low population density and partly to the extreme risk in following any economic strategy that isn't either being self-reliant for all your own needs or stealing from those who are.
Why do all the hard work when you can just take what you want at gunpoint?
No one is market dependent because there is no market. The last couple hundred years have been a strange time. For most of human history, per capita productivity has been more or less stagnant when averaged out. It started to rise around 1500 and really started to spike around 1800. That huge spike in productivity, in societal and per capita wealth, is industrial capitalism. This isn't my graph or something from the Mises Institute. It's from data compiled by Professor Brad DeLong, a lefty economic historian at UC Berkeley. Whenever I use this graph, there's a stream of counter-arguments that capitalism didn't cause that spike. It was steam engines and mass production, improvements in shipping and banking systems. But that's what capitalism is. That's how it manifests. Technological advance isn't an evolutionary process, at least not until machines are self-replicating. Every new advance or incremental improvement is the result of people working to make it happen. And while there will be some advancement in nearly any social structure, capitalism, more than any other structure yet tried, incentivizes progress and punishes stagnation. Market dependency drives specialization in the pursuit of efficiency in the name of maximizing profits. That pushes technological innovation, labor-saving processes and machines, an increase in productivity, and with it a rise in social wealth, even if it is most definitely not evenly distributed. Most of what we see in Fallout is a long way from this tipping point, which I'm going to call the capitalist progress threshold, mostly to annoy the Reds. But if we head over to the West Coast, we see some interesting developments with the new California Republic. Of all the Fallout factions, it's the only one we can recognize as a nation-state. It has defined territory, a regular army, it issues currency, and it has an industrial base. But is the NCR capitalist? Feudal? Something else, or in between? We know that the new California Republic has industries. It produces textiles, it produces munitions, it trades manufactured goods. It's not a Soviet-style planned economy with the state directly controlling these industries, but it isn't an entirely free market either. The economic output of the NCR comes from organizations that are somewhere between corporations and cartels. The Crimson Caravan Company, for example, has trading posts in all the major settlements and a significant share of all merchant traffic. But they aren't just wasteland Walmart. They're a quasi-state entity. Most notably, they're presented as the primary factor behind the reintroduction of bottle caps as currency, replacing the NCR dollar for most transactions and seizing large caches of caps to control the money supply. Consequently, the NCR does not control its own monetary policy. Crimson Caravan does.
People have been counterfeiting bottle caps forever, but it's always been small scale. A bottle cap press is a whole other threat. We can't have anyone devaluing our currency by mass-producing new bottle caps.
The NCR continues to issue its paper currency, but it's of such low value compared to competing currencies like the bottle cap or the silver denarius used by Caesar's legion that the NCR dollar is essentially a propaganda effort, linking the NCR with pre-war America and thereby implying it's the rightful successor, a show of legitimacy more than an active medium of exchange. Which is interesting in context of this little snippet from the recent Fallout TV series, which stirred up some controversy at the time. In 2077, the NCR won the first Battle of Hoover Dam against the Legion. By the time of that battle, the NCR had already long since abandoned the gold standard and switched to fiat currency. This tends to happen during prolonged wars. It creates a way for the government to generate credit to finance itself at the expense of debasing the currency. A good analog is the continental currency issued during the American Revolutionary War. In 1775, the Congress issued the first batch of paper money, which traded 1-for-1 with the Spanish silver dollar, a de facto common currency of the time. By 1781, a single silver dollar bought more than 100 continentals. The NCR dollar has fared somewhat better with a 10-to-1 exchange for a silver denarius, but it's clearly a debased currency I suspect due in large part to the pressures of war expenditures. The end result being that the NCR has competing currencies, with its own being deemed inferior to the money of its mortal enemy and bottle caps picked up from the ruins. The competing currencies can't be easily counterfeited, being silver and centuries-old relics respectively. This is particularly complex given the return of wage labor, a notable trait of capitalist systems, and anyone not in direct employ of the NCR seems to get paid in these other currencies. NCR taxes are essentially feudal when applied to farmers in the form of quotas.
I wouldn't be able to meet the quota and the NCR would kick me out of my job anyway. Nah, it's better I get out on my own terms.
But for all those market-dependent wage earners, they presumably have to pay their taxes with currency. So they'll pay them in NCR dollars because people will pay taxes with the currency that loses value, not the one that gains. And the NCR has to accept their own currency, otherwise the illusion of value completely collapses, and with it much of the NCR's image of legitimacy. And if the NCR military is paid in paper, it creates a strong incentive for off-book dealings in other currencies. I suspect a lot of guns and ammo slip out the back door of armories in exchange for silver in a conscript's pocket. So based on the currently available information, and with Shady Sands having been the capital of the NCR, I think we can make a case that the Fall of Shady Sands in 2077 is quite possibly an economic collapse triggered by the cost of the Battle of Hoover Dam, but brought on by decades of overextended territorial claims and debt-financed war, resulting in an abrupt political shift, one so dramatic that it resulted in the moving of the seat of power. The physical destruction of the city came later. And really, the game was rigged from the start, because the NCR was trying to be a modern nation-state without having the requisite industrial capacity. It has some elements of a capitalist economy, but it is still essentially agrarian and feudal in its foundations. Wealth comes primarily from the land, whether farmland or grazing land, and it's very difficult to increase productivity. If you want to double your crop yield, you can't just farm harder, and you can't add another shift. You need more land. That places a limit on the rate the economy can grow. We see it most plainly with the sharecropper farms.
The water ration's still a problem, and the NCR doesn't look like it's going to do anything about it anytime soon.
The NCR has managed to combine all the failings of Soviet-style collective farms with the inefficiencies of medieval peasants working small plots. But it's possible that the decline of the NCR opens up some new opportunities. When we last saw the East Coast Brotherhood of Steel in 2287, there were possibilities taking shape for the proto-feudal wasteland economy being replaced with a bare-bones capitalistic market economy under their watch. Records on how that played out are sketchy at best, but we do know that in 2296, that same Brotherhood chapter has the resources to dispatch a contingent of knights and vertibirds to the opposite end of the continent via the airship that a decade prior had been the single biggest engineering project the organization had ever undertaken. The Brotherhood clearly has the industrial and economic base to project military power farther than the NCR ever managed, even at the height of its expansionism. There are many questions about the fusion power technology revealed at the end of the series, but if we make like an economist and assume that it's actually a viable power source for a long span of time and not just a gesture, lighting up a city for a few days or weeks until the irreplaceable pre-war artifact is used up, then there's a chance to rapidly jumpstart an industrial economy. Between the availability of electrical power without the need for the coal or petroleum industries to support it, the presence of skilled Brotherhood technicians and their attendant army to impose order, and a population just far enough removed from the NCR to remember that times were better and are ready to be led back to prosperity, this could be the start of a real recovery, the start of that upward spike. And once they've rebuilt industry with all the good and bad things that come with it, then we'll fight over all the various socialisms offered as alternatives to replace it, and if we're extraordinarily lucky, avoid another great war long enough to stumble on something that actually works for people. Or the Brotherhood will follow their usual form and fumble the opportunity, and those murderous monopolists in the Enclave will get another shot at building a world in their image. Because economics is one front in an endless war for the future. And war never changes.
You are out of sight, and a friend of the cat's in my book.